Now we finally start talking about actual elicitation techniques. So there is a bad news up front. There is no universal method on how to perfectly extract and elicit all requirements in a perfect manner. There are many techniques you can use, and we'll introduce you to a large variety of methods, but you have to explicitly choose them for your project, and it can change from project to project what makes sense. And there are various variables that you have to consider. For example, which requirements would you like, or do you have to identify the elicit? Conscious, unconscious, subconscious requirements. What type of project is it? How big is the project? How much time do you have? What's your budget? So many things. Also, the experience of the stakeholders with a particular technique can be relevant parameters. And yeah, also your experience on how to judge what the stakeholders could handle. And in general, you are not relying on a specific elicitation technique. It's rather a combination of different techniques that lead to the perfect or a good result, and they also minimize the risk of missing requirements by just using a single technique. Here you can find a list of elicitation techniques that we'll cover as part of this lecture series. This is not a comprehensive and complete list. There are many more techniques, but we think that those, first of all, are among the most common and also the most promising, and that they are also easy and with a good quality implementable by you as a requirements engineer. We separated them into various categories. So first, we're going to talk about survey techniques, which are, for example, interviews and questionnaires. Later, we'll talk about creativity techniques, document-centric techniques, observation techniques, and then also supporting techniques that can be used supplementary to the previous ones. Before we start with the first category, let's maybe talk a few minutes about the most common or most important techniques. Which in my opinion are also the most intuitive. If you want to get requirements from a particular stakeholder, what do? You talk to them, you interview them. The problem is that it's quite time consuming, and it also requires explicit integration of standpoints, but it allows for better adaptation on background of the interviewed person and interested interviewee. And also you can have direct feedback. Like you ask the question about how is this supposed to look like, or how this is supposed to feel. And when you don't understand what the other person is saying, you can straight ask for more information or feedback or other details. So interviews are often quite good, but they need a lot of time. Second most important version or technique are observations. You just look at someone doing their job or solving a particular task that is related to your project, and then you elicit requirements from them. It's quite complicated to do that because there's also implicit knowledge involved in most of those tasks that someone does, but it's very powerful. And it also has the least impact of presumptions. So meaning if you ask someone directly, like what do you want, it could be very much different from how they are actually doing something. Then workshops, just being interviews on a larger scale with some kind of group dynamics, to put it in like very simple terms. They are very often used. They have a relative little expenditure of time. They are foundation and fundamental for team creation. They help to create new ideas. So coming from, for example, vision workshops. But they have problems with social structures, and there could be a focus on hotspots. So problems with social structure means someone might not be happy to counter what their boss says, or that only the boss is talking, or that they're focusing, like the focus of the workshop discussion shifts towards a particular problem, and it's very difficult to get a room full of people back on track to what you actually want to talk about. And this is your job as a requirements engineer, because you have to elicit all requirements, not just the hotspot requirements. And in addition to those three most common techniques, so interview, observation, and workshop, you can add other techniques that add and make the results better. But we'll also now talk about the more difficult or more complex elicitation techniques in the next few videos, and also of course go into detail on those that we already discussed and presented right now in much more detail. So like, how do you do a proper interview? How do you schedule and conduct a proper workshop? So all the details that you need to really do this, not just on a high level.